Here we go. And on the show today, we have Lee Povey, and here is why he is awesome. He's a high-performance leadership coach, helping founders, startups, and teams cultivate an Olympic mindset. Keep in mind, that is a key word here. Those that talk in SEO language, we'll be talking about Olympic mindset a lot today. His focus is on unlocking leadership brilliance through candor and clarity, two of my favorite things. For more than 2 decades, he's worked with Olympic-level performers on the biggest stages in high-pressure environments. He's also a former Great Britain and USA cycling champion himself. He knows of what he speaks, and he's here as well. Hello, Lee.
Hi, good morning.
I love when I have somebody I'm talking to in the same time zone as me. It always makes things a little bit easier. I appreciate that immensely.
Especially when we're both getting up at 7 a.m. for this.
Yes. And I wish I had more coffee. I will say that as well. But still, not as bad as it could be. 7 a.m. is not horrible. It could be worse. But I'm excited still to talk to you. I'm fueled by anticipation. Before we get into our topic today, which is helping leaders with that, and how to, so many questions I have about Olympic mindset, and they're the dark side that actually could ruminate as well on. What's your best or worst employee experience, Lee? I have to start off with that question.
Thank you, Russell. So way back when I was going to school, I had dyslexia, or I have dyslexia and autism, and I didn't realize this until very recently. I mean, I knew school was different for me, and I learned differently from other people, and I got a lot of feedback from the teachers that I was super bright but lazy, and I wasn't lazy. I just didn't understand how to learn the way that they needed me to. So I didn't go to university, which is a typical thing for somebody like me in the UK. So I went into sales, which is what you do when you're smart and you have no idea what you're going to do in your life. And I got incredibly lucky. So the guy that interviewed me was the area director for the company that I ended up working for. And in the interview, he said to me, he said, I never take a manager from another company and bring them into my company. I always promote them from inside. So straight off, that was motivational to me of, this guy understands that he's here to develop human beings, and the kind of the power of you knowing that in this organization, if I do well and if I try hard, I will be rewarded. And he was true. And he was the youngest ever manager before me. I then took over his mantle as the youngest ever manager for that company. And the reason I want to share this was because, one, how motivational that was to me as a young person to say, right, you will be rewarded if you try hard and do things well. And then his managerial style, for me, and he was quite adaptive. Now, looking back now, I still think a lot about him and how he managed people, because he was quite adaptive. So he showed up differently from different people. There was another manager who I was kind of a rival with, and he had a habit of getting himself into silly situations and doing stupid things. And this guy was pretty hard on him. Like, really, here's the boundaries, kept him in rein. For me, he was completely the opposite. He said, whenever you need anything, you call me. Whenever you want to talk about anything, you have a problem with a member in your team, you come to me for advice. Otherwise, I'm just going to trust you. And off you go and do well. So it was seeing how adaptive he was, and also seeing how he knew how to turn up for you to get the most out of you. And he understood that I'm very self-sufficient and I like to be left alone. And I'm also courageous. If I'm struggling, I'm not going to hide it. I'll come and say, I'm really struggling, I need help. And he knew that, and he knew how to make me feel comfortable doing that. And I progressed really well under him and had a, honestly, great experience working there. So I got very lucky my first corporate job. The guy was great.
Way to set the bar so high for yourself for the rest of your career.
Exactly. I've had some disappointments after that, Russell. There's been some issues.
It's either one or the other, right? Either you have the most amazing experience when you start and then nobody can reach that level, or you have the worst experience possible. You're like, it couldn't possibly get any worse. I have one question though, and I love that they, focused on promoting within, and that worked for you and they knew you. I think that's exemplifying a great leader, is knowing your team individually, knowing what works for them. But I'm always curious when people talk about a promote within, did they have a roadmap for you? Like, it's nice for them to say, hey, we're going to promote you. This is what we're going to do through. but they don't necessarily show you how to get to those next levels, to the next level, to the next level. Did they in that situation?
Yeah, very clear roadmap and quite a bit of training and a training officer. The whole setup was very well done. So it was a large corporate company, and they had these areas, and this particular area, this guy was the area director for about, I think it would have been about 30 or 40 offices of a large corporate company. And this 30 or 40 offices was a family-owned business that had just been bought by the corporate company. So they had all of their own structure in place, the back end of the corporate company, but really still ran like a family business.
I love that. Talking about the dream, Lee. You're talking about the dream. It's fantastic, especially for someone that's probably new and trying to figure this all out. Because unfortunately, and I know you know this, a lot of young staff are then managed by other young staff that don't have leadership experience. So that just is a recipe for disaster, because you've got first impressionable employees and you've got new managers who've never managed before, and then everybody's supposed to work out okay. So that's so important. It's why fast food places like McDonald's are great training grounds, because there's such a foundation of expectation as opposed to just throwing you to the wolves. So I love this. I could go off on that whole conversation, but we're here to talk about Olympic mindsets. When we talked about this as initially as a topic, because obviously this is your expertise, I'm so curious about it, because we talk about burnout. We talk about like this focus on excellence is thrown around in the corporate workspace, and nobody even defines what that is. So I'm super curious about your ideas around this from an Olympic side. But before we get into that, I love defining things, because I've never been an Olympian. I've never been a high-class athlete. So when you look at the idea of an Olympic mindset, what are you even talking about when you talk about this?
Yeah. So to me, it's the aggregation of marginal gains, which is a phrase coined by the British track cycling team. And it's looking at everything you do and thinking, how can I do each part of this just a little bit better? And then when you add it together, the gains are quite big. And it's not getting caught in dogma. So, example, when I first moved to America, so I moved from the UK to America 12 years ago, I turned up at this point, I was still a cycling coach. I turned up at the local track and I'm watching a session. I joined in and they were doing this particular warm-up. I didn't think it was an optimal warm-up, so I joined in the warm-up, and the warm-up finished in a race, which is not what a warm-up is. A warm-up is to get you ready for the training session, and people are trying to win the warm-up. I'm like, this is a bit odd. So I spoke to the coach afterwards. I said, for what reason why do you do that type of warm-up? And they were like, oh, that's what we do here. I'm like, okay, good. But what's the intent of that warm-up? Oh, but that's the way we do it here. Okay, good. For what reason are you doing this warm-up? I wanted them to explain why they were doing the warm-up in the way they were. And they were not thinking of it like that. So they couldn't even understand my question, because they weren't thinking, what are we warming up for? What are we maximizing in this warm-up? What's our focus of the warm-up? They were like, this is the way we always warm up. Right, okay. So I want people to stop and go, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why is my business doing what I'm doing? Why am I spending time doing the things that I'm doing? And is there a better way of doing it? And letting go of the ego of, oh, this is our way, and move into a mindset of we're doing the best we can with the knowledge we have now. And if we get new information and we get new knowledge, we change what we do. And the way that we do things isn't our ideology. Often I see that, especially with sports coaches, this is my training method. Awesome. Well, what happens when a better training method comes out if that's your training method? So for me, it's being adaptable. It's having that performance mindset of we are here to do the best that we possibly can. It's knowing when to rest. That's a huge thing for a lot of corporate clients. Elite athletes know I need to rest or I don't improve and I don't recover. So I'm working with a company at the moment. The founder of the company, very, very bright guy. I've been working with him for quite some time now. And he's doing an active rest period with his company because we're about to do a bunch of new launches. And I just love the way that he framed it in athletic terms of, right, we're going to get all non-essential meetings off the calendar right now. I'm going to give you a couple of extra days this week and next week off, and just get you really ready and fresh for this big launch that we're about to do.
I like that. I like that a lot. I also, you made me think too when you were talking about adaptability. I get so frustrated when I hear some leaders talk about this is my leadership style. I'm like,
Yes.
well, then you're a horrible leader because you can't
Yes.
adapt to other leadership style. Not everybody needs to be led in the same way, and that connects that dot for me. A question though, when people think of Olympic, and I've seen it through some of your language, is talking about high performance this, high performance that. But there is this sort of gray area where there's confusion around what high performance is, sort of associated with Olympic mindset, and then this toxic hustle culture of work, hard, incremental. What did you do today? And you started in sales. Sales is some of the worst areas for that because it's such a competitive environment. Or you're the bottom three, you're out this month. Like it is such a intense competitive environment, which doesn't lend itself to the humanity of leadership. How do you reconcile and combat that perception and that type of culture?
Yeah. I just want to go back slightly to what you said at the beginning there. I completely agree. If somebody says to me, here's my leadership style, I already think, well, you're a stunted leader. Like there is a limit to what you're capable of doing because you can only work with people like you. And my vision of a great leader is somebody who's very adaptable, can meet everybody where they're at and can change themselves to be able to get the most out of the people they're working with. So yeah, to come to this kind of high performance, people misunderstand what high performance means. People think that high performance is killing yourself, right? It's the person who works the hardest. That's not high performance. High performance is the person who is getting the most from themselves in a sustainable way and getting the most from others in a sustainable way. And that means that you've got to enjoy what you do. That means there's got to be humor. Like there's nothing... I've not been in environments where there's more humor than Olympic training levels or Olympic training systems because it's so hard. We're at the track, you're in the gym in the morning killing yourself, so you're tracking in the afternoon, you're tired, we'll do an effort, we'll come back and everybody's ripping into each other between the efforts and having fun because that's how you motivate yourself and that's how you kind of get yourself ready for the next moment of pain. And it has to be the same in the workplace. Like there has to be some camaraderie, there has to be some fun. We've got to feel like we're in this together, and that is another part of high performance. And another part of high performance that people miss is the ability to call each other out in a loving way, which is, hey, is that actually high performance? Are we really doing the best we can here? Are you showing up as the best version of yourself here? And for me, you can't do that unless people are able to be kind with each other and empathetic with each other, because otherwise you can't call each other out in a way that's actually going to be impactful. It just feels like bullying rather than I want to be around the best version of you as opposed to you're doing it wrong.
I still feel that ambition has to be in there because you wouldn't be working for that next increment and the next increment if you weren't motivated, if you weren't ambitious. But that also doesn't perpetuate forever. Sustainability and consistency has to be part of it. How do you balance those out with an Olympic mindset?
So when I think about motivation, I maybe think about this differently from other people. I think media and social media has completely ruined what we think about motivation. You watch the sports movie and you've got the coach on the sideline shouting and doing the huge motivational speech. Sure, okay, but that's not really what motivates people. Motivation's intrinsic, as you say, is ambition. It's like, what do I want from this? Where do I want to go? When I turned up at that real estate agency as a 20-year-old man and I'm having that interview, he said, what do you want? I said, well, I want to be, what's the best way to get paid here? He said, become a manager and an area director. Right, I want to do that. That was a conversation that we had on the interview. And that was why I chose that company out of the three that offered me a job, because he said that here's our pathway. We will promote you from within. So it's setting up a structure that people can understand how they can progress in the company, that they get training, that they get coaching from their leaders, that they get support, and they understand, as you said right at the very beginning, what's the pathway for me in this organization? And if there isn't a pathway for that person, or their role is going to come to a limit, as a leader, I think we should be developing them still to go on to their next role somewhere else. I think that is great leadership. Is our job is to be custodians of the people that we're working with and to help them be the best versions of themselves, wherever that lends and wherever that ends up. And I often think that what happens is people try to keep people stuck because they're like, I'm afraid they're going to go. It's better to get the best from them, to keep pushing them, working with them, inviting them to be the best versions of themselves. And if they leave you, that's okay. Because they'll go out in the world and they'll talk about you and this company and how great it was, like I did with that first manager that I had in real estate. And I was like, yeah, anybody else that was in real estate, I'd like, go work for this guy. He's great. And many of my friends did. So I think it's really important that and it's just good for us to know that we're here to help other human beings. Most of us work well thinking that we're helping other human beings, and it keeps us in connection, which human beings want to be in connection with each other.
It's not only in wanting to keep staff, it's also not wanting to go through all the hoops of hiring new staff as well. There's a lot of leaders that are way too busy to even be leaders. So they are, to be fair, so that they're like, oh, if I keep them around, that's another 3 months of having to hire somebody. I'd rather just put my thumb down on this person and keep them in their role rather than. And I empathize and I hate it at the same time.
Yeah.
Who's defining success through this, Lee? Because I'm thinking it from the athlete. Is the athlete defining the success of, I want to reach the Olympics? Is the coach defining the success? So I'm trying to think of it now from an organization standpoint, the employee or the organization?
Everybody. We're all in this together, right? So success for an athlete is going to be what they're capable of doing. Success for the coach is, how many athletes am I producing? What are they going on to do? And when I created the Olympic Development Program, it was myself and an endurance coach. So I run the sprint program, he ran the endurance program. The first thing we wrote down on our sheet was make better human beings. The second thing was create Olympic champions. Because my view is, if you make better human beings, if you help people be the best versions of themselves actively, rather than just hope it happens, you actively help people be the best versions of themselves, you'll get the most from them and they're going to go on to a more successful life. It's a win-win for everybody. And when we're thinking of elite athletes, if you have a program with, say, 50 athletes, how many of them are going to go on to be an Olympic gold medalist? If you get one out of that 50, that's incredibly good. So you can't just have this program of, right, we're only doing this to find Olympic champions, because then the program's a failure if you don't find an Olympic champion. And that isn't really what it's about. It's finding the best versions of these people so that they can be the best athletes. And I see exactly the same in the corporate world. Help people be the best versions of themselves. Your company will benefit from it. The people around will benefit from it. The culture will be much better because of it. And people are going to enjoy coming to work for you, and people will want to come and work for you, and the word will get out. This is a great place to work.
I appreciate you wanting to build good humans. I think that's foundational. I mean, I think if you give them the tools and the empathy tools to be able to be, but you have to start with yourself. And that's a big part of the show, is we talk about relationship at work, but the biggest relationship we need to start with is with ourselves. So if we're showing up as a leader with an Olympic mindset, how do we need to show up? What's some of the inner work that we need to maybe be focusing on to even be able to make this a reality in our workplace?
Yeah. So one of the things that surprises leaders, if they've not done this kind of work that I do before, is the first thing we focus on is them. So, I go and work there and they're like, well, I've got a problem with this person, I've got this issue, and can we sort this issue out? Sure. Let's talk about you and let's establish who you are. So my coaching model is, let's establish who you are. Let's establish where you want to get to, the leaders, the founders, the CEO, and then what's the gap between that we need to work on. And then we can look at, okay, now how do you influence other people? And then how do you work with other people? Because if you don't understand yourself and what's getting in the way of you understanding the world and being the best leader that you can be, you can't understand other people. So I think you're spot on. It's this, I have to understand me, what triggers me, what hooks me, what activates me, how I show up in my relationships, how I show up as a leader, how I show up in relationship to being a leader. A lot of the founders that I work with are the smartest person in the room. Very, very bright people, very, very capable, can often do any role in their organization as well, if not better than anybody else in the organization. They're exceptional human beings, which is why they're running the startup and scale up companies. And they're the issue for the company because they're getting in the way of the company's development because they can do everything better than everyone else. So they'll often step in, take over from somebody and do something. And then the company's limited by how much time and energy does this person have. So my job there is to get them to understand their disease, their need to fix things, their need to take over, their need for things to be perfect, their problems with letting go, or their issues with worthiness, that they can only feel worthy if they're the hero and they have to step in and do everything. And if we can work with that, then they get much more comfortable letting other people step up, letting other people grow, letting other people expand their company, which is ultimately what they need. If they're really going to scale, that's what they need to be able to do.
I see it from founders for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I also see it from I call it the Michael Scott problem from The Office, right? He was an amazing salesperson, and then he got promoted to a leader, and he's not a leader. But so we lost a great salesperson and gained a horrible leader. So I know when we talked previously, we were talking about subject matter experts and this aha moment they need to have in order to shift into becoming a leader, because they are not the same thing. I know you're touching on that.
Yeah.
What is that tipping point for individuals for them to realize that leadership and being the expert on everything is not the same thing?
Yeah. Let's take a step back. I think often people get promoted who shouldn't be promoted because the setup in the company is incorrect. And what we do is we reward, you just gave the perfect example. We reward the best salesperson by taking them out of sales and putting them into leadership. So we've got our best individual contributor, we're taking them out of what they do really well, and we're saying, okay, now the next rung up for you is to be a leader. They may not be suited to being a leader. Not everybody should be a leader. And the best organizations I see understand that their sales departments, you keep your best salespeople in sales and you get different people to come and lead them. So that's just one thing. And we see this in sport a lot, where you get the Olympic champion, the next part of their career they believe is to become a coach. They may not be suited to being a coach. They might not have the right mindset for it, the right kind of approach for it, and usually they don't have any training. So that's one thing it's a big difference between the corporate world and the sports world. There's a lot less training in the crossover from being a contributor to being a leader, from being an athlete to being a coach. And that's often why we see young coaches really struggle and fail and quit sport, is because there isn't the support there should be, and the roles are completely different. And it's the same in sales. Your top salesperson is going to be somewhat selfish, very, very driven, and then they've got to give that up and go, well, how do I support everybody else? Completely different mindset and skill set. So I think it's worth just noting we don't choose the right paths sometimes for people, and we put people in positions because they're ambitious, and it's like, well, why don't we just pay them more? The top salesperson should be earning more than their managers because they're the person bringing in the most money, and then it's the manager's job to, correlate all of them and get them being their best versions of themselves. So I think there's that, and then it's just we need to give a lot of support to people. If we're going to invite them into positions of leadership, what we tend to do, especially in America, is we invite people into positions of leadership. We give them the title of coach, leader, CEO, and then we think they understand leadership. And it's something you have to learn. And there's so much learning. If you really want to be a good leader, there's so much learning. I'm naturally a leader. It's never been a problem for me to step up and take responsibility, which is for me a big part of leadership. Is I'll take responsibility for this. I'll make the decisions. But then the problem with people like me is you think you have to have all of the answers. You think you have to be the smartest person in the room the whole time, instead of how am I leveraging everybody else in this room, in this organization, to make our decisions smarter than I can do by myself? And also, if I'm always the smartest person in the room, I'm telling everybody else they're the dumbest person in the room. So how to invite them into being, feeling like everybody's smart here and everybody has a worth here, instead of dimming their light, turning their light up so that I can get the most out of them.
And how do we look at that for ourselves, though? Because I completely agree with everything you're saying, but it also feels like the system's broken. And I want to talk about culture a bit later. But right now, I want to kind of understand, as a leader, how am I becoming more self-aware that I might be the part of the problem? I'm not a great leader, but ego generally gets in the way, or imposter syndrome will get in the way on both sides of that spectrum. So how do I figure it out for myself? Because unfortunately, a lot of leaders have to lead themselves through this.
Yeah. Well, you get somebody like me, ideally. I mean, that's the value of a coach, right?
Yeah.
The value of a coach is we can see the stuff that you can't see right now. And when I think about coaching, take it back to my cycling days. When I was first a coach, I thought I have to have all the answers and these people have got to rely on me. And by the end of my coaching career, it was completely different. I thought my job was to make them know so much about cycling, or to help them, not make them, help them know so much about cycling themselves, the sport, that if I got food poisoning on the day of the Olympics and I couldn't go to the trackside, they're going to perform just as well. And that's how I see leadership. My job is to help you be the best version of yourself, so you don't need me. That doesn't mean that I'm useless. And this is where many leaders get it wrong, is they think they need to be needed, and especially they need to be liked and they need to be needed, rather than my job here is to support you being the best version of yourself. And that takes some confidence, and that takes, feeling good about yourself so that you can let go of needing to prove yourself the whole time. And this is what we often see in young leaders, is this, I must prove myself. It's the hero's journey, where if you look at the male archetype here and the female archetypes of mature leadership, it's the king and the queen, and the king and the queen enable everybody around them to be the best versions of themselves. They're not off doing the quest anymore, right? They're the ones that are enabling everybody else to be the best versions of themselves. And this is what we want. We want leaders that are like, how do I help you be the best version of yourself, rather than how do I keep showing you I'm smarter than you or more capable than you.
How comfortable are we? I already know the answer to this, but I don't know the degree. How comfortable are we going to need to get with failure? Because Olympic mindset is, sure, success. We think Olympic, we think medals, but there's so many failures along the way. And we as individuals, never mind culture, but we as individuals are afraid of it. So how do we right that wrong from an Olympic side mindset sort of thing?
We completely reframe it as to it's a learning experience. That's it. And I think you're completely right, Russell. We think about learning experiences as failure instead of, well, I learned by doing that. I think it was Thomas Edison that when he was asked about the light bulb, said, well, I learned 99 ways how not to do it, because it took him 100 tries to perfect a light bulb that worked. But he got there. And this is what we need to be thinking about is, right, well, I try this and see what happens. And I used to see a lot of this in sport. I've done a particular type of training. It's got me to this level, so I want to keep doing the same type of training. Well, the chances are you're going to have to do a different type of training to get you to the next level, and then a different type of training to get you to the next level, because you've got to force an adaptation. And it's the same in companies. What we did to get here is unlikely to get us to go here. I'm working with a company at the moment that's getting ready to be acquired, and they've had to change some internal systems with some feedback from firms that may be interested in buying them, because they say, well, that was great, that got you to here, but we want you to be this size. This system needs to be different. Your internal processes need to be different. And this is, they're really smart leaders, and they're like, brilliant, thanks for the feedback, let's change what we're doing. They're not resistant. They're like, yes, that's right. That is the pathway for us to get to the next level. So it's being that level of adaptability that you can look at what you're doing, even if it feels like it's working, or even if it is working, to go up, but that's not going to get us to the next level or the next version of us. Here's a crossing point where we need to adapt and change. And that means we've just got to be comfortable with things aren't always going to be great. Sometimes we're going to be learning. Sometimes we're going to be having experiences. Sometimes we're going to be, things aren't going to go the way that we want them to. But if we're not willing to push that envelope, we will only stay where we are. There's no way that we can expand, get better, get bigger, scale without taking some risks and without being willing to fail. And the problem as humans is when we think about failure, we tend to make it catastrophic. Is that the way you say that word? Yeah.
Catastrophic.
Catastrophic. Thank you. And when we go to okay, what's the worst case scenario instead of what's the most likely scenario, which is, okay, we make this mistake, we backtrack, we try a different way, instead of we make this mistake, the company is doomed, we've all lost our jobs. And it's good leaders take that pressure off their employees and they say, go learn, go experience something, go try some different things and come back to me. Go try a product, research it. Let's see what it's like. I work with companies that make products for consumers. And they're always iterating and trying things. And they'll try something, they'll go down an avenue, and they'll come back and they'll go, we tried that, it wasn't right, we couldn't get it to work properly, it didn't taste right, whatever it was. Okay, let's try something else. That's what the process should be.
How do we bring this Olympic mindset into our teams? Because we're doing the work, we're understanding that there's this incremental work we need to do every day, failure, we're embracing it. But then we're working with a diverse team of individuals who may be coming with different cultural backgrounds that have different views on all of these things, Lee. So how are we introducing this into a larger framework?
Candor, I think, is really important, and the skill of feedback is really important. So often when I get called into a company and I start, typically I'll interview a bunch of people in the company, get a feel for the company, what's going on, maybe do a 360 of the leaders. And when we're in that process, what I often hear from kind of newer startup scale-up companies that are typically, the type of companies I'm working with are typically doing well, but they're not really set up for the next level of scaling up and success. And that's why I'm getting called in. And as I mentioned earlier, that founder is probably hanging on a bit too tight. So I get called in, and one of the first things I see is the level of feedback isn't good enough. So people are not being given enough feedback, and the quality of the feedback is not good enough. So one of the early things I do is workshops on how to give feedback, because people are afraid to give feedback, yet they desperately want feedback. And I'll hear things like, oh, I'm worried I'm going to get fired. And I'm like, okay, what makes you concerned that you're going to get fired? I just don't hear anything from my boss, so I don't know how I'm doing. And then I go and speak to the leadership team, and they're like, oh, we've got this great team, and they're really doing well. And I'm like, well, they don't know that. So I think feedback is a huge part of high-performing teams. You'll see this in the military. You'll see this in high-level sports teams. The feedback is so important, and people aren't afraid to give feedback because they know that feedback is vital for progression. You have to be talking about what's working, what's not working, how you're showing up, how I'm showing up. And there's a lot less concern and ego about sharing feedback with each other. And they get really, really good at it. So that's something that I work on a lot with companies is what's your feedback like? How are you delivering feedback? And the reason I'm so good at doing these workshops is because I was so bad at it. I was terrible at giving feedback. From a young age, one of my gifts is I can see how to make things better. I've always understood how things can be improved. And the approach I would take is just to tell people you're not doing it very well and here's how you should do it instead. Now, when you go up to an athlete, a velodrome, and you walk up to him and you say, hey, why are you doing it like that? Why don't you do it like this instead? You'd be so much faster. That doesn't get you rapport. Typically, that person reacts badly or tells you to get lost. And even if they just kind of nod their head, they're not listening. So I realized, hey, I'm not being effective here. And honestly, one of the things I like most in the world is to leave things better than I found them, whatever it is. I've always been highly motivated by that, much more than by money. I like to improve things. And I want to share, here's what I see and here's how the world could be better. So I've had to learn, if I want to be effective, I've had to learn how to give feedback in a way that's actually effective and actually matters. And it gets people on your side rather than pissing people off. So I've learned the hard way and really studied, how do we give feedback? How do we make feedback really impactful so that person walks away with something they didn't have before the conversation?
When it comes to things like feedback, communication, which I think is a huge key part of what we're talking about here as well, how does it work so I'm thinking the Olympic mindset, and I'm thinking the Olympics, there are team sports and there are individual success sports. So how do we balance that in the workplace? As a leader, we're approaching our team. Are we looking at as a team success? Are we looking at individuals' success to move the team forward? I'm trying to think of that athletic analogy of how do we approach this as a coach?
Yeah. In modern sport, there's no such thing as an individual sport. You might have one person compete in 100 meters by themselves. There's a team behind them helping them get there. So it's like It's like the fallacy of the self-made person. There is no self-made person. Everybody had somebody who helped them get to where it was, whether it's a parent, a teacher, a family member, a first boss who helped them understand things, an investor. Everybody has had support. There is nobody who has pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, which is a stupid thing anyway, because if you pull your bootstraps, you fall over. So it's like there's nobody that's done that. So I think it's really, in a team organization, the leaders need to be looking at this person and think, what motivates this individual? How do I tap into that so that I can get this individual motivated? And as I said earlier, motivation's intrinsic. You can motivate people by threatening to kill them or by starving them, and that's it. You can't motivate someone to do something they don't want to do just because you ask them to. Money's not enough. People will stay for money for a period of time, but eventually money won't be enough. So really what we've got to tap into is what motivates them as a human being. And I believe the way to do that is to have a clear mission for the company so that they understand what the mission for the company is. And then a clear role for them with lots of feedback so they understand how their role fits into the mission. And they're getting feedback on, here's how you impact what we do, and to pay them fairly. We don't need to be paying them more than anybody else, but we want to make sure that we're paying them fairly compared to what they could get elsewhere. I think if we hit those three things, that's a really good start. And that's a good way of getting people motivated and invested in what they're doing. They're getting feedback on how you're showing up. They have a growth plan so they know what's their opportunity to grow if they want to grow. And not everybody does. Like, not everybody wants to be a leader. Some people are like, hey, I found my position and I just want to be really good at this. And growing for them is being a better version of themselves in that particular role. And I think we should never downplay that. When I first work with founders, what tends to happen is they're like, Lee, these people don't get it. They can't work 120 hours a week. They don't care. It's like, they're not like you. You're the freak, not them, right? You're the unusual one, not them. So how do we leverage what you're capable of while understanding what the majority of the business is going to be like and what the majority of the people who are going to work with you are going to be like? And companies don't typically do well when we have 30 people with the founder mindset in them, right? We want some leaders, we want some followers, we want some people that know their place and are happy with their place. And then what we want to do is maximize what we get from those people. And I believe we maximize in that by giving them a great experience where they want to come to work and they want to work for you and they want to be the best version of themselves and they get rewarded for being the best versions of themselves. And that reward isn't just financial, it's emotional. They get told what they're doing well. They get told where the opportunity gaps are for them and you help them get there.
When I think of athletes as well, though, they also are constantly training for years for a moment. Like, they are always putting in the work for this one thing that might not happen down the road. Where's resiliency in this in the workplace? If I'm a leader in a team and we're incrementally moving, but the success, quote unquote success, might not be down the road, and they're not seeing those immediate results. Maybe that's a quicker way of saying it. How do we keep them, to your point, you don't like motivation in the way that says, but there still needs to be something purpose-wise. Is it the vision and mission? You mentioned mission, but I know so many organizations that have horrible ones and visions that are just sort of, either 17 pages of what a vision is or that don't make any sense. I'm trying to connect the dots between this incremental success that may not come. People may come and go by the time success reaches. How do you align that with an organization versus athletics?
Look, we see companies succeed with poor vision, with poor missions, with poor leadership, just because they have some talented people there or somebody's come up with a really good idea. Just as we see athletes succeed that aren't training optimally, but they're just really, really gifted. Now, typically in today's world, these people eventually get caught out. So, got the Tour de France going on right now. There's an athlete in that, Tadej Pogačar. He won the Tour de France on his first try. I don't know if anybody else has ever done that. Unbelievable talent. Typically, the Tour de France is one of, if not the hardest endurance sporting event that humans do. And he won it, I think he was 21 or 22. We tend to hit our physical endurance maturity in our late 20s. So it shows you how unbelievably gifted this kid was. Then another team came in with another athlete of a similar level, probably not quite as gifted, but very close, Jonas Vinegar. And the team was much better run, much more effective, much more optimized. And Tadej Pogačar won his first 2 Tour de France's and then lost the next 2 because his other team came in and just did it better than them. Now, Tadej was probably the more gifted athlete, and I think he's going to show that. And he won last year's Tour de France. I think he's going to win this year's Tour de France. But he had to go away and look at everything he did. There's a good interview with him with Peter Attia on Peter Attia's podcast. And he had to go away and look at everything he did, everything he does, and reassess it and go, oh God, how do I do this better? And I think, as organizations, we got to look at what can we do differently and how do we support everybody in what they're doing and how can we do it better? And it's also coming back to, you said athletes are training and have this like one big competition, but there's thousands of other competitions they're doing that get them there. So they're constantly trying things. They're constantly getting out there practicing competition, and that's what the workplace is. We're constantly trying things, we're constantly getting tested, and then we go back and we analyze it. I think coming back to, and I kind of missed it when we were talking about feedback, for me the most effective people in the world are the ones that are best at self-analyzing themselves and analyzing and debriefing in groups. So my favorite thing as a cycling coach was my athlete would go and do a race. They'd come back. So I was a sprint coach, so the races are less than a minute. They go do their race, they come back. We have these rollers that they warm down on after the race. And once they've done their warm down, I go up to them, how was the race? And then they will tell me their experience of the race. Well, this is what happened. What did you learn? What would you have done differently? I'm getting them to analyze themselves and critique themselves. And then I will add what they've missed. And I'll be like, oh, did you think of this? Or how about this? Or let's try this next time. And that for me is where the joy is in World, is we go and try things and then we come back together and we talk about what we've done, we analyze it, and then we say, right, how can we go and do this better? That is high level performance for me. That is where the pinnacle is we do it, we debrief, we go and try it again. That's the Olympic mindset. How do I do this better? How do I analyze what I've done? How do I think about what we've done? How do I go and try something else? Or how do I optimize what we've done?
So let's pull back a bit within the larger organization. So as leaders with an Olympic mindset, working with their teams, that's certainly one thing, but we are not an island. We generally are working within a larger culture, larger millions of subcultures. What are some practices and policies that you'd like to see or organizations should have in place in order to support this type of work, this Olympic mindset, this type of high performance mindset?
I think you need a culture of asking questions is okay. I think you need a culture that leaders can be vulnerable. And by vulnerable, I mean they can say, I don't have the answer to that. Let me think about it. Let me go away. Or why don't we both research this? Or why don't you go away and research it and come back to me and teach me? And we have this horrible media that says that leaders have to be geniuses and know the answers. And Steve Jobs was the genius and he did everything. And it's just not true. And I don't know why we kind of glorify that version of leadership, because it's not leadership and it isn't actually what you see when you go into these organizations. What you see is hundreds and thousands of really talented people working on things together, trying things, failing, succeeding, coming back, giving each other feedback. That's real leadership. That's real high performance. So I think it's from the top, as the very top, whoever's in charge saying, this is the way that we work here. And we work with a model of, it's okay to admit you got something wrong. It's okay to say, I'm struggling. It's okay to say, I don't understand this, in the pursuit of, we just want to do it better. Because otherwise what you get is people saying they don't admit they can't do something, and then they go down these horrible roads where they do completely fail because they've never put their hand up to say, I don't understand, or I'm not sure what we're doing here, or this doesn't feel right. So it's having that culture of mistakes are okay. I mean, not like making mistakes all the time, But it's like it's okay to try things. It's okay to be adventurous. It's okay to be courageous. And it's okay to talk when that doesn't work and when it does work and why it worked. And just so much more communication about what it is that we're trying to do and where we're trying to get, so everybody feels like they're part of something. Instead of, as you said, all these little silos that I have no idea what I'm doing and how does it compare to what the mission of the organization is.
I love that you brought back that sometimes we have people in leadership positions who aren't leaders. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges we have, is that we throw the word leadership around far too easily. Oh, we have a leadership team. I can count 9 of those 10 people who have never led anything in their life. They've never made anybody better, but because of the title they have. So how do we change that from Olympic mindsets? I want to go actually even hiring is what I'm thinking of right now. Because if we want the right people, we want the people that are actual leaders to move through the organization, to get those executive, it needs to start with hiring at any level. How do we implement an Olympic mindset right there in the hiring process?
So one of the things I was really well known for as a cycling coach was I was really good at spotting talent. And I think I was good at spotting talent because I could look at somebody, I could see where they were now, and I could think and I could understand how much more optimization there was available for them, and therefore how much room they had to grow. We used to call this headroom. How much headroom does that athlete have? And you can look at 2 athletes. And let's say they do, one of the events in cycling is a flying 200 meters. So you're on the velodrome, you fly down from the top of the velodrome, go around the bottom of the velodrome, and you have your last 200 meters timed. And that's your entry to the sprint competition. That's your seeding for the sprint competition. And you can look at 2 athletes, and let's say they both do 11 seconds dead, which is good for a 15, 16-year-old athlete. And one of them has all of the aero gear on, the latest bike, the best wheels and tires possible. Their riding position is excellent. And the other one has like old equipment, doesn't have any good aero gear. Their riding position isn't quite right. They look ragged. They're both doing the same time. I want the kid that looks ragged, and I'm going to take that kid. I'm going to say, right, what happens when we optimize you like this kid? Then where are you going to be? And I think of this the same when we're employing people. Often we get hooked in. I mean, we can talk about interviewing and how bad humans are at interviewing, and basically all we do is we employ people that we like. And how do we do that? Well, it's we employ people who are more like us rather than people who are more able to do the job. But I think of this in the interviewing process of looking at people who we think, hey, that person's got a lot of headroom. There's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of room for growth. And if I bring that person in and we look after them as leaders and we help them grow, they have this potential to really flourish, rather than someone I'm like, I think they're hitting their limiter in this position, and that's probably all of they've got. So I always look for people that are curious, that want to understand, that have room to grow into a position. I don't care about age. I'm 52 and I'm still learning just as much now as I was when I was 21. I'm on my 4th career. So personally, I don't care about age. I care more about how curious is this person? How willing to learn are they? How undefended are they? Are they defensive every time I ask them a question? Or are they open? Or are they, I don't know the answer to that. What do you think, right? That's what I'm looking for when I'm interviewing somebody. I'm looking for potential.
Also, I guess back to that failure comment is, how do they embrace failure? How do they look at failure? Because I can see people in interviews never wanting to even mention the word failure, because I've seen people talk about their careers and you wouldn't think they ever did anything wrong ever. They got every job they ever applied for. It's this perfect, world that they live in, because they want to put their best face forward and they don't want to be vulnerable, especially in a situation like a hiring process where one side of the panel has a hell of a lot more power than the person that wants the job. So they don't lean into that humanity, the vulnerability, which actually makes them better suited for the job anyway.
And will get you more rapport with the interviewers, because I bet the person sitting there has failed. And when you talk about your failure and you talk about it with some humility, it's that question of, what's the worst thing about you? Oh, the worst thing about me is I'm just known for working too hard. Okay, yeah,
I'm a
great.
Perfectionist.
Exactly.
I
just try too hard, and I just do too much, and I take on too much responsibility. That's what everybody says about me. I think when you're on an interview, so for people listening that are interviewing, having humility, being able to talk about your failures and what you learned from them, to me, makes you a very attractive candidate. That candidate that just can't say, oh, I've never failed, well, then I don't trust you. And also, I don't think you're courageous because you're not trying hard enough. If you've never failed, you're not trying hard enough to push forward to learn. Athletes fail all the time. Athletes make mistakes all the time, and you have to make the mistakes to learn. The other thing I want to bring us back to that we've not mentioned yet is this ethos of the Olympic mindset is focus on the process, and the results will take care of themselves. So what I see, a lot with young athletes and sports coaches is they're focused on winning. Winning is actually out of your control. We think we can control winning. We can't. We can't control winning in sports, and we can't control winning in business. Somebody can come along with a better idea than you, with more funding than you. They're going to end up being a better company than you. So you can't control that. But what you can control is, what are you capable of doing? What is it that you're doing to be the best version of yourself? So taking us back to that aggregation of marginal gains, what is it that I'm doing to be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday? That's all I want from you. As a leader, that's all I want from you. As somebody who supports leaders, that's all I want is you're getting up and thinking, how can I be a better leader today? Coming back to your statement of people that move into leadership, get given the title of leader and then just think they're a leader. Nobody. There's so much that you need to learn. There's so much involved in it. And the best leaders are the ones that take that with reverence and go, I've been given this title, now I need to earn the title. Right? You don't deserve it because you've been given it. You deserve it because you've earned it and by your actions. And that is, what am I doing to show up as a leader for the people around me? How am I showing up as a leader for myself? How am I showing up to be a better version of myself so that I can connect better with the people around me? How am I creating systems? How am I creating cultures that these people can thrive in, rather than just, I'm telling you how to do it and you better do it? And that's what we see from a lot of leaders, is they think that leadership is, now I'm in charge, I tell people what to do. The best leaders I work with very rarely tell people what to do. They invite people in. They invite their voice. They invite the best version of themselves. And even when we're doing targets, for me, the most effective way to do a target is the person you're working with, what do you think your target should be? Now, you as a leader know what the target needs to be, right? You have an idea of where we need to go, what we need from them, but you're asking them because you want their buy-in. You want them to feel like they've created it. And then you steer them, for an athlete, right? So they want to do a 9-second 200 meters, which is going to get them to the Olympic Championships. They're currently doing 12 seconds. And you say, okay, what's your target for the year? And they go like 9.5. I don't think you're going to drop 2.5 seconds in a year, but I love it, and I love the enthusiasm. Let's put some stepping stones in. Let's just go for 11.5 first and then reevaluate, so that you are guiding that person on what their goal should be, because you have an understanding of it, but you want them to really feel bought into it, and that they've taken time to think about, what do I need to do to get to where I want to get to, and what are the stepping stones? For me, if we take care of the process, so if I do the right exercises in the gym, I do the right stuff on the bike, I look after my position on the bike, my tactics, my aerodynamics, it will all come together for me to be the best version of myself. If I turn up on race day as the best version of myself and I get beaten by somebody else, that's all I can do. I'm not disappointed. And I've lost races and been really happy about my performance and proud of myself. And that's the best I can do. I've won races where I was clearly the better athlete and been really disappointed because I executed really poorly and I kind of got lucky with winning, or I just won because I was so much more of a gifted athlete. So I want us to be looking at the process and rewarding ourselves for good process, not rewarding ourselves for the results. And as I've seen in business, in life, in relationships, in sport, if you do that, the result takes care of itself.
And to normalize this in an organization, as opposed to having that one team and that one leader working in this way, because that happens where they find this secret formula and everybody else wants to work for that one team.
Yes.
But everybody else is like, why are they so successful? And then they continue to do something else entirely. So normalizing that within a larger environment, a larger culture from leadership at the top. Absolutely. So I like wrapping it up with a question of, if somebody's listening and they're really intrigued by everything you're providing.
Let's hope somebody is listening, Russell.
Yes. Oh, at least 3. My mom is definitely listening.
My mum probably too. Hi, Mum.
What's something they can do tomorrow? Because, I mean, they're not I'm sure they're not going to go full hog, I guess, for a horrible metaphor. What do you think would be the first couple of steps or first step they could do tomorrow to start the process of going, I want to try this different way of thinking?
The first thing is you have to understand yourself. So work with somebody like me. And this isn't an advert. I've worked with people like me. Every athlete has worked with a coach. We know it's the right thing to do as sports people, yet for some reason we haven't quite figured that out in the workplace. Get a teacher, get a coach, get a mentor, and they're different things, right? So teachers teach you how to do that thing. A coach helps you understand yourself and your pathway, where you want to get to, and helps you lay out that pathway. And a mentor shares from their experiences. This is how I did it. This is what I've seen other people do. And they're not necessarily getting you to understand yourself better. They're just sharing, here's my experience. This is what I did. Take from it what you want. So get more people into your world. Get coaches, teachers, and mentors into your world. That is, you have to have that if you're going to be a better version of yourself. And then start with that question of, how can I be a better version of me? What's getting in the way? How do I show up in conflict with others? Because that's a really good clue as to what's getting in the way of our relationships. What relationships do I need to foster? What is it that I need to understand and learn about myself to be able to show up better for other human beings? So take myself. Going back to school, right? I was always told I was really gifted. So I've used my intelligence through my life to control things to make myself feel safe, especially when it came around my autism, which I'm only, discovered a couple of years ago and really kind of unpacking. But there's certain situations I don't feel comfortable in. So I'd use my intelligence to control the situation and people so that I could feel safe. As an adult, people don't like being controlled. As a kid, it's okay, right? And it gets you through your family system. But as an adult, people don't like being controlled. So I have to understand, what is it about me that I need to protect, to look after, be it energy levels, be it noise, be it light. What are the things that I have to be aware of that are going to affect me and my performance, so that I take responsibility for that and I don't put that on others. And then I can show up how they need me to show up. We started this conversation right at the beginning with something that is really important. I want people to take away, which is your job as a leader is to be a custodian of the people in your charge. That's leadership. You're looking after their welfare. You're looking after their ability to progress. You're looking after the culture and making sure everybody actually enjoys what they're doing, because we work much better when we enjoy it. Human beings are designed to enjoy what they do. And it's knowing that, and then it's also being adaptable. And I think that's so important. I really want people to take this away. If you think you have a leadership style, you are a very limited leader, because you can only work with the people that work with your style. And I saw this with sports coaches all the time. And I think it's our job as leaders to go, how do I meet this person where they're at? How do I know the person that wants to have to kick up the butt, right? Come on, buddy, let's do this. You can do this. And how do I know the person needs to be left alone? If somebody comes up to me and says, you can do this, it just pisses me off. I am more motivated than anybody you'll ever meet. I'm more competitive than anyone you'll ever meet. So when you start to kind of push that, you're just going to get pushed back from me. Like, go away, I don't need it. That's now getting in the way. Whereas if somebody says to me, Lee, I trust you. Come to me when you have problems. Let's talk about it. Let's analyze it. Go and do it. I'm off to the races, and I will come back to them and I'll say, hey, I'm thinking about this, or I'm thinking about that. What do you think about that? I love those conversations with somebody that I believe is open-minded. If somebody's just telling me what to do, especially if they're not as smart as me, unbelievably demotivating for me. One of the reasons why I work for myself.
Thank you very much for that, Lee. That is Lee Povey. He's a high-performance leadership coach, former cycling champion himself, and the preacher, that doesn't sound great, the advocate of Olympic mindset. Let's go with that, the advocate of Olympic mindset, and helping us shift in that direction as well. Thank you so much for being here, Lee.
Thank you, Russell. Really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you getting me on.